Everybody, thanks for joining us today. Who all do we have here? Type in the chat box, say hi, tell us where you're from. Going up to 8 degrees today. I'm so excited to go outside after this. How's the weather where you are, Melissa? You're in what? Welland, St. Catharines? Where's your office again, St. Catharines?
Yeah, our office is downtown St. Catharines, and it's sunny here for once, which is glorious. So sitting right in front of the window, which is why it's so bright in here. And quite
Oh,
enjoying it.
perfect. Oh, wonderful. So we've got Stefan from Ottawa. We've got John from Keswick, May from Toronto. So glad you guys could join us today. Oh, Giovanna from Vaughan. Wonderful. So it seems like we're the Ontario hub, the place to be to spend your lunch today. Let's see who else. For those, oh, Bayar from Burlington. If you're just joining us, we're just giving everybody 2 minutes to jump in. So say hi, tell us where you're from. Oh, Carrie's from Edmonton. Nice to see you, Carrie. Glad you're here today. Toronto, Hillsdale, north of Barrie. I'm not familiar with Hillsdale. Wendy from Vancouver, Ali from St. Catharines. Oh, BR the buyer. Okay, gotcha. Cyrus from Vancouver. Hello, Cyrus. It's been a long time since I've had you in my classroom. It's good to see you. Sean from Vancouver. Awesome. So, hi from Burlington. Hello. Happy New Year to you too. Isn't this wild to think, wow, we're already, a month and a half into 2023. So we will get started. Then. Welcome everyone to Overnight Success Doesn't Happen Overnight. And I'm sure that is not a revelation for anybody who's here, anybody who's been part of the real estate community for a little while. It's just funny because we see it on social media and we're like, oh, look at what happened overnight. Somebody went from a portfolio of no properties to a portfolio of 50 properties. It just happened overnight. It doesn't work like that. So one of my goals this year in our webinars is to dig a little deeper than some of the surface stuff that kind of gets, shared on social media or talked about. I want us to have some more honest conversations about what are some of the challenges we've had, what are the lessons we've learned, and how can we help others by sharing that information. So Melissa, we are so honored to have you join us today. Melissa and I have been friends for, it's been a few years now. We met volunteering for Ontario Landlords Watch. We were part of sort of a board that we were helping figure out next steps, how we can better support landlords in Ontario. And then Melissa and I just really hit it off. And I'll let Melissa tell you a little bit more about her story, but it's been a pretty amazing couple of years. And she has transitioned from being, a mid-level manager at one of the big 5 banks into being a full-time investor and property manager. So we're really fortunate to have Melissa here. We'll just do some quick housekeeping things, and then we will bring Melissa on and allow her to start sharing her story. So just a quick reminder, if you're new to Zoom, although I'm sure lots of people have been on Zoom before, but make sure that you go, when you're in the chat box, there's a drop down on the bottom there, and it defaults to hosts and panelists. Make sure that you have the drop down clicked so that it's everyone, because otherwise Melissa and I are the only people who are seeing, your comments and your insights and everything you're sharing. We want to make sure everybody can see it. So click the drop down, switch it to everyone. Now, we are going to have a good number of people joining us in the webinar today. I'm sure people will have questions and comments. So if you have a question specifically for Melissa and I to address at the end of the webinar, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom. That way your question doesn't get lost in the flow of the chat box. So use the chat to interact with us and with each other, and then use the Q&A if you have a specific question you would like Melissa to or myself to answer or address at the end. Our agenda here quickly is welcome and introductions, which we're obviously doing now. We'll have the discussion, we'll have a Q&A period at the end, and then I will come back and do a quick wrap up for the webinar. So my name is Elizabeth Kelly, and I am the host of your webinar today. I help new and experienced real estate investors strategically and aggressively grow their portfolios and maximize their profits in order to achieve their goals more quickly and easily than they ever dreamed possible. I've been an investor for almost 20 years. I've done probably most of the strategies out there. I'm moving into land development and commercial, so I'm really excited about my transition and growth over the next little while. But I love hosting these webinars and the opportunity to interact with new investors and people just like you. We are fortunate today to have Melissa join us, and Melissa is a powerhouse. If you guys follow her on social media, Melissa pulls absolutely no punches. She jumps into the landlord-tenant board and watches hearings for fun, and then shares all of her takeaways. And I love recommending clients to Melissa as a property manager, because I know how much Melissa cares about her tenants, about her owners, and about all the people in her network. So Melissa, would you be okay to unmute and tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to sitting in front of us here today?
Oh my gosh, my face is turning pink. Okay. Actually, interestingly enough, Elizabeth has been a really big part of that journey as well too. And so I started investing in real estate probably around 10 or so, 11 years ago now, and started off slow, not really knowing what the heck I was doing. And over time, as I acquired more, I really identified that it was important to network and speak with other investors and hear what they're doing. There's so many different ways to go about real estate investing. And I had a wonderful banking career alongside this. It was my primary focus. And I hadn't really had my sights set on moving from that, but just as kind of family change, my kids are getting older, my parents are getting older, I was acquiring more real estate. And I did engage Elizabeth for coaching as well too, when I felt that I was kind of stuck in how quickly I could learn the things that I wanted to learn. And ultimately made the decision to leave my career and pursue not only in real estate investing, but also property management full time. That's it in a nutshell. Elizabeth knows a lot more than nitty gritty details on stuff. If there's an area you think I should have expanded on a little bit more, happy to do so. It's been a long journey. There's been lots of learning along the way, I will call it, and lots more to come, I'm sure, but I'm happy to be here.
Oh, well, we're so happy to have you. And for those of you who, Melissa has recently, well, I guess 3 years ago now, you had a beautiful baby girl. And part of your transition was you went back to working in the bank. And this was just after, COVID, and there had been some work from home in there. And then you went back to having to do that commute from St. Catharines to Toronto. Tell us a little bit about, was that a factor in your journey to decide, like, I just can't do this anymore? Like, how did you know it was time to leave your job when you left?
I kind of tend to rate. So I had not yet been back to commuting when I returned to work, because we were still fairly new post-COVID, and we couldn't bring people into the towers in Toronto and up the elevators efficiently. So our entire team was work from home. And, I tend to measure things on the happiness factor and how happy I am with what I'm doing. And what I found when I returned back to the bank, and it took me a little bit to figure this out, but part of my career had really been focusing on the growth and rapid change and adapting to that, and being part of building a whole different division within the bank that hadn't really existed before. And I loved that and everything that came with it. When I went back to work, it was a lot more steady state. And while you can get involved with continuous improvement and things like that, I just found my heart wasn't in it, and I couldn't get it in it. And so I wasn't happy like I wanted to be. And then in addition to that, my mom she fell and broke her shoulder, and I had to move her pretty quickly into a retirement residence and kind of take care of her affairs there. And I just, that was part and parcel. I had thought that I would take another year or two longer than I did to leave my bank, but I took 6 weeks off of leave in the summer to help my mom, and I just kind of never really went back. I figured that if I could accomplish what I was doing part-time, imagine what I could do full-time, and I was just going to give her. And if things didn't work out the way I thought, or if I didn't feel that I'd made a great decision, then I still had options, but I really felt that that was the right one. And so just kind of decided to go for it.
That's awesome. Now you went from, managing your properties. How many doors were you looking after when you opened your property management company?
Not a lot. Um, so my own, oh gosh, I have to think back now.
Just ballpark numbers. Doesn't have to be specific, like a
I
dozen?
want to I want to say 15-ish, maybe 10 to 15 doors on my own at that time. And then I started taking on clients. So we're currently so I started taking clients on in the spring of 2021. And so we're about a year and a half later, we're currently managing at around 200 doors right now.
That's phenomenal. That is absolutely amazing to have grown a business successfully like that. I mean, so many, what is it, 96% of businesses don't make it past year 5, and you're doing phenomenally well. So tell us a little bit about how you knew that you would be successful as an entrepreneur. Like there's a lot of people who are here today with us who might have visions of leaving their job or creating a secondary stream of income. How do you know that you're a fit to be an entrepreneur? What signs were there for you?
Well, if I back it up a little bit, well, I never met a no that I liked, first off. um, During the last several years of my career in banking, my role was really focused on, so as an investment consulting to start, which is really acquisition of investments and how we were helping people in the retail side of the business to meet their short and long-term goals from a financial standpoint. And so to have a role like that, and quite frankly, to be long-term successful, you definitely need to have integrity with it. But you have to also have a business mindset. And I found that it just kind of stuck with me. There's just certain things like, I kind of tell people sometimes I think I've become unemployable because I really like being able to look at things from an analytical point of view and to think of how we can kind of do I guess, right by the clients that we have to serve. That's always been part of my career the entire time. So I would say that the entrepreneurial mindset grew over time with the business and developed as well with the real estate that I was acquiring myself, because I was the hobbyist landlord, right? I decided it's going to be fun to be a landlord. That was my first foray. I didn't really know what I was doing. And over time, I understood that in itself was also a business. And I just feel that I had a natural affinity and a mind to want to do well. And I decided that I was going to. And that was kind of it. So there's so much I don't know. There's so much I don't know. I remember even when I moved from a client-facing role when I was at the bank and I moved into head office, it was a very different type of environment to be working in. And I remember telling my boss at the time, like, there's so much I have to Google in a day because I don't know, but I'm determined to be resourceful and get through it some way, somehow, and to put my best foot forward. So that really just carried on into business. And I don't have a business degree. I don't have any formal post-secondary education aside from the financial planning accreditation that I earned on a self-study program. So I didn't really have any forms or templates to learn it from. I learned from people who were examples to me during my career in banking, and then also out on my own and just learning from others. I've got a wonderful network of people who, when I'm stuck on something or not really sure how to handle it, and Elizabeth, you're one of them, Christian, there's a number I can think of that it's like, I'm not really sure if I'm on the right path here. Like, I think I am, but am I missing something? To run it past, and I get the feedback and off I go, right? So, I mean, that's it. That's it.
And I love that. And Giovanna says, this is inspiring. I don't have any formal business education either. And you know what? Neither do I. Neither do I. And I really honestly think for those of us who are entrepreneurs that it's more important that we have certain qualities, certain skills, a certain mindset. I think that's more important than any formal business training. I mean, we know lots of people who have business degrees who are not great in business. So I think who we are as people is probably more important than any sort of formal training. And like you said, resourcefulness is absolutely a key skill. Knowing when to ask for help. I mean, I've started a number of different businesses over the years, and I have learned so much on the go, so much from being curious, from asking the right questions, from seeking out the right network of people, and being willing to learn as opposed to being hard-headed and assuming that I know everything and that nobody can teach me anything. So I love that, Melissa. Can you share a little bit with everyone about how you prepared to leave? What was it that, what needed to be present in your world or in your family, in your bank account? Like, how did you know, or what needed to happen for you to leave? What comfort level did you need to have?
This is going to sound bad, probably. I left just on the expectation that I was going to make it work some way, somehow, with the support of my family, of course. My husband, I'm married. Um, and I just decided it was going to make it work and I was going to figure it out. And I did not have, it's terrible because any book you read will tell you to map it out, to have a plan, to work out what you think your projections are. The reality is that I loosely did work out what I thought my projections would be in the first year, and I was way off because my business grew rapidly by word of mouth and referral. And I couldn't tell if I was necessarily doing okay or doing not. Either I had money in the bank to pay the bills and pay myself, or I didn't. So like initially leaving my job, my goal was to make sure that I could reasonably pay myself to do what I did. Because how many small business owners do we hear out there? They don't pay themselves out of their business. They're living off of, I don't know what they're living off of,
Credit
but they're,
mostly.
and so I made a decision. I wanted to operate my business on cash. So we don't borrow money. We use credit cards for purchases and stuff like that, but we clear them every month. So we're not running our business on debt. And I take a look every few weeks to kind of check and see how things are trending, especially now that we have a full fiscal year under our belt. But again, we went from me being one person to now I have 4 full-time staff. The business now looks nothing like it did a year ago. And I couldn't have really, truly, I think, projected what it was going to be. So, my answer may sound a little strange to say, well, what kind of plan did you have? I just had the plan that I was going to have to figure it out because I was not going to have all the answers. And I was never going to have all the answers. And if I waited until I had all the answers, I never would have done anything.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I had one of the gentlemen who taught the creative financing course when I started with Rich Dad in 2008. He used to talk about, if you're sitting in your driveway and you wait and let's say you want to go to the grocery store, and you sit in your driveway and you wait till all the traffic lights go green, and then you back out of the driveway and then you start driving. Is that the way we drive? That's not the way we drive, because the reality is, even if we sat in our driveway, waited for all the lights to go green, by the time we got to the ones further down the street, they'd be red. And the reality is, it's more about knowing the actions to take, the things we need to do, how we figure things out. That is more important than going, I know everything and now I'm comfortable. Most of the time, our growth comes from being outside of our comfort zone, from not necessarily having all the answers. And I'm not advocating for, jumping off a cliff and thinking or just, hoping and praying that before you reach the bottom that, there's going to be something miraculous that saves you. But what I'm talking about is doing a certain level of planning, preparation. Maybe you want to have X amount in your bank account as a reserve or a cushion, so that if things don't go the way you plan in the first year, then you have the opportunity to be able to cover some of the issues. So maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe you need to know, okay, I'm going to shift to part-time, and I'm going to do some contract work or something along those lines. Maybe it's a hybrid departure, like whatever those things are that need to happen. But you can't wait until you're 100% comfortable and then assume that that's just a progression that happens. And I think, Melissa, you and I talked a couple of times where you were like, I'm not sure. And then you're just like, I can't stay at work anymore. Like, I think you just get to a point where you're like,
It
the
was just
freedom
time to
is there.
go. And for anyone who's never worked in banking, leaving in the summertime was pretty significant because it's the end of the year where they pay out their bonuses. And a lot of people question my sanity. And I just said, I can't stay for one more minute. And it's no discredit to the bank. I was just, well, and as you know, Elizabeth, when I'm in, I'm all the way in. And I just go and I give her. Now, that may not be the path for everybody. And, of course, I did make sure that I have children that need to be fed, I have bills that need to be paid. And I did not just go in a total hope and a prayer. I did have to make sure that there was some savings in the background, that, I had the conversation with my husband, hey, are we on board with this? He fully understands as a business owner himself that what the long hours are going to entail. And yes, there's some great flexibility, but it's not easy being a business owner either. Things don't always run smoothly. In fact, most time they don't. So, so you should kind of have an idea, but also have some faith in yourself, right? And give yourself the time to see something work through. Sometimes the results aren't immediate. But if you have a decent amount of preparation and how you think it's going to work for you, then I think you really have nothing to lose by trying, right?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the worst things that we can do is live our life with a ton of regret looking backwards. And, a lot of us go, well, it's a big deal. And if I left and blah, blah, blah. And again, I'm not advocating jumping without any kind of planning or preparation, but I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and she's a public health inspector, and she's really unhappy at her job, and she's got the golden handcuffs. So she doesn't know where she would make the money that she makes, where she get the vacation that she gets, all these other benefits and perks. But she is absolutely miserable. Like every time I talk to her, she's got all the hallmarks of like stress and burnout and all these other things, but she doesn't have the confidence to say, I have transferable skills. How can I build this into a business where I'm in control of my time and my freedom and all these different aspects that we're looking for? So I think there were some people here who said they were hoping to leave in the next few years. I would love to know, if you're planning on leaving your job in the next few years, type in the chat box, tell me what it is you want to do with your time. Like, are you leaving your job to start a business? Are you leaving your job to hang out on a beach? Are you traveling the world? Like, what is it you envision doing when you leave your job in the next little while? And while people are doing that, we've sort of talked a little bit, Melissa, about how, formal education, as long as you are determined to find answers and surround yourself with the right people, formal education isn't necessarily a caveat for being able to run your own business. So, what are the qualities that you think people should be looking to, if they don't have already, to develop or identify or strengthen in themselves? What do you think is important for someone who is looking to make the transition to being, a full-time real estate investor or a full-time entrepreneur?
Well, that's a really good question. And I would say that number one, be a contingency planner, because things are always going off kilter, off plan, not as planned. And if you learn to expect that to happen and contingency plan, it really will help with the stress that comes from being responsible for so many things. I mean, the way I look at it right now as well, too, is that I have 4 full-time staff that depend on me to run this business well, to provide their paychecks. And at the end of the day, when things aren't going right, the buck stops with me, literally. And so you need to get comfortable with having that degree of responsibility. And I would say that, especially in my career in banking, what I've seen from business owners is that they may be very good at what they do in their craft, but they're not necessarily good at running a business. And something that I have learned, especially as I've added some wonderful staff into our fold, is that there's some things that people are just better at than I am. I can accept that, and I need to work out how to delegate things to someone who is better than I am at certain things. It takes a little bit of time, right? You have to have enough income and grow to the point where you can actually afford to pay another person as well too. And the other piece I would say from a business standpoint is to be comfortable with getting ahead of that versus always being behind. And that piece of advice came to me from another long established business owner in the area here. He says, hire ahead instead of scrambling to catch up, because even though you might feel a little bit of a pinch in the cash flow now, it'll help you with your peace of mind after. So, and that's probably part of the contingency and the strategy planning as well too. Being diligent with your paperwork. We don't accept cash payments on things. Like, make sure that you keep on the right side of the government, and do at least a little bit of research on stuff, and make sure that you're working with experts on the things that you need them to be there. For example, an accountant. I have an accountant. He does my taxes. I don't do my taxes. I want nothing to do with my taxes. My mother was an accountant, and I grew up in that environment. But the sheer knowledge that you need to have to address the things that we do in running our business. I mean, we have a bookkeeper. I don't have the time to do the books. I know how to do them. I'm not going to do them, right? So you really just have to get comfortable with being prepared for what can happen, trying to get ahead of what can happen, and just going with the flow sometimes, because you drive yourself crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And I love what you're saying. For those of you who are here, if you haven't read the book, Who Not How, that is a really powerful book. If you're thinking about, moving out and starting your own business or working in an environment where you would have other people supporting you, say for example property manager or something along those lines. So read the book Who Not How. And then the other thing that I really want to I really want to drive home for people is the importance of knowing your numbers. You would not believe how many people I meet with. And, one of the things that I do as part of my process as a coach is I send a spreadsheet and I say, put in your properties here and let's take a look at your current portfolio. And let's see where there are opportunities to optimize your income, where, we can work within your existing portfolio that'll keep the costs low, and then we can maximize your income. It is amazing how many people fill out that spreadsheet and come back to me on a strategy call and say, I had no idea. I didn't realize I was paying this much. I didn't realize that, these were my actual costs. I didn't realize that my cash flow was so low because I did my numbers before I bought the property. And I haven't gone back in to see if my numbers that I came up with before were actually reflective of the numbers afterwards. And it is so, so, so important. Nobody is going to watch the bottom line like we will. I had a staff person in 2014 who I caught stealing. And the way that I caught her was because I was following the numbers and looking at the numbers. If I wasn't paying attention to be able to say, why is this not here? And why is that not here? I never would have caught her. And she was so sneaky. She had different ways that she was taking cash payments from people. She had moved people into apartments and they were showing as vacant in our property management software. She was showing up at their door and collecting the rent on the first of the month. So to us, it looked like a vacant apartment that she hadn't been able to rent out. She was collecting all of the cash from them. She was taking cash out on the way to the bank for deposits. So there was so many ways that she was able to just skim money out of the business. And if I hadn't been watching my financials, I would not have caught that. And then it started coming out. And the more that we investigated, the more it came out. So and I guess maybe this is a really good idea too, is one of the times when you will start to notice problems in your systems and processes in your business is when someone goes on vacation. If someone goes on vacation and you dive in and you're trying to cover for them, that is one of the key times where you will notice there's a problem here. So the other way, it happened coincidentally at the same time as I was diving into the financials and going, where is this money? But at the same time, my husband was doing showings and he went to an apartment that was supposed to be vacant and there was people living in there and they'd been in there for months. So the combination of those two things was how we caught issues. But nobody's going to pay attention to your financials and your bottom line like you will. So you need to make sure you know and understand them. And as a real estate investor, when we do projections at the beginning before we buy properties, every month we should be circling back and looking. How many people here have seen a dramatic increase in their insurance in the last couple of years? Anybody here seen a dramatic increase? I was looking at my numbers today and then I suddenly got curious and I'm like, how much has my insurance gone up? And I went and looked, and not that long ago, I was paying $9,000 for insurance on my commercial building. And this year's insurance is $32,000. So if I wasn't paying attention, I would have missed that, because guess what needs to happen to offset an increase in my insurance like that? I need to boost my income. I've got to figure something else out, because if I wasn't paying attention, my business might go under, because all of a sudden I might be operating in a deficit, because who anticipates insurance alone goes up that much, let alone utilities. So going back to you, Melissa, can you tell us about some of the mistakes you've made and kind of what you've learned on your journey to, your overnight success?
Mistakes that I've learned along the way. So I would say that probably one of the more valuable things I've done is to be hands-on and doing stuff and learning how to do stuff. I've had friends teach me how to install flooring, vinyl plank. I've done some other, I'll call it basic stuff. I can paint with the best of them, that kind of thing. But I would say that one of the mistakes I always made, or that I learned not to make, is to undervalue another person's time when it comes to what I'm going to put into my property, because I can sit there until midnight painting that wall because it's my place and I'm going to do it. But if I'm going to pay someone else to do it, I should understand what those costs are going to be, because you can't achieve any kind of scale doing everything yourself. And that was actually a factor partly of why I ended up with the property management companies, because I intended to scale and I couldn't be everything to everybody. And so having property management company really opened the door to facilitate that kind of management. Is a lot more efficient. So another mistake that I've learned is, and it may sound funny because I have a very long career in banking, financial planning. I've done lending, investment consulting, all that kind of thing. But when it came to selecting lending for real estate, that's not something they really teach you, right? I know what lending is. I know what a mortgage is, fixed variable, all that stuff, all those terms, great. But at the end of the day, knowing what kind of lending strategy that fits your portfolio and the changes it's going to see in the future has cost me a lot of money with the mistakes that I've made. And I had to write that, and I did. But of course, now we have a different set of circumstances and changes with the higher rates that are in play, and a fair bit of my portfolio has higher rates. And, again, from a business perspective, did I anticipate that? Did I anticipate that correctly? Where's that income going to come from? It needs to come from somewhere, right? So, one of the mistakes that I made early on was not really knowing how to properly factor in future things that could happen. And I've had to do that, right? Properties need capital repairs. They need new windows. They need new roofs. Your cash flow might be stringing along right now with the higher rates because maybe you don't have to replace those things, but in 5 years you will. Where's that money going to come from, right? So I've learned that it's really also important to forward think a little bit and not over leverage. There's some debts that I cleared off. I could have just taken the money and bought another property, but where I really wanted was to be able to sleep at night. So I cleared a couple things, and man, when the rates went up, I was really happy I'd done that. So trying to think if there's anything else that really stuck out at me.
That's honestly, Melissa, that's a fantastic takeaway, because so many of us as investors, we're trying to learn and we're trying to do our best, and we're just kind of following, what we see. Maybe we see it on a podcast or a webinar or something like that, but we might not know enough, at least in the beginning, to understand, like, what of this applies to me. And this is a completely different world that we're in right now, with the environment, with the recession and the interest rates and everything else. So the podcasts and the information, the books and stuff that were written 2 years ago, we should be approaching things very differently than some of the recommendations that we got back then. And one of the big takeaways, and you and I have talked about it before, is finish a project before you start the next one. Like when you're starting out. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the rooming house? And I mean, you're a more experienced investor, so obviously you probably have a couple of projects going on, but in general, especially when you're starting out, one of the ways that investors get themselves into hot water is they're trying to do too much too quickly. So buying a property, making the renovations, renting it, refinancing it, and then moving on to the next one is what I'm sort of advocating for at this point. But tell us about your rooming house, because it's a pretty cool deal you've done.
Yeah, that one comes up pretty often. Actually, I just talked with Erwin about this last week. So the rooming house was a project that I felt had a community purpose. When I purchased it, it was filled largely with female international students who were a lovely bunch. But I really felt that, or at least that's how it was described to me. I'm sure some of them are done school now and working, but I really felt that the house could, because it's a legal rooming house in the city, it has a special zoning designation for that purpose. So lots of people rent places out by the room, but it's not necessarily classified as a legal rooming house. They're quite popular in the Toronto area, although there's been some studies showing how that trend, of course, has declined. But in the Niagara area, most of the rooming houses are also trap houses. So this one was a special project that I wanted to take on, knowing it would be a challenge. And it has definitely proven to be challenging. I'm sure we've had some conversations where I'm like, Elizabeth, what have I done? What am I doing here? And now we've allowed natural turnover to take its course. So we purchased this place. It has 11 rooms in it. There's 2 bathrooms, 1 kitchen. It's one So we've had a handful of rooms turn over naturally and have rented to, we'll say, independent adults. Usually they tend to be of the lower income or fixed income variety, but we're really open to everyone. It just, I think, depends on what a person's looking for in their home. The bulk, probably 2/3 of the house, is still the original ladies that were there. We had given them some notice ahead of time that the demographic of the tenants we'd be accepting was going to change, so that if that they didn't feel that was a good fit for them, some may have preferred female only, that they were able to make some changes in terms of their living arrangements if they wanted to. But we didn't want to force anyone out. We just wanted to let them know so that they were aware, and they don't just show up all of a sudden there's a man living in the house. They're like, whoa, that's not what I signed up for. So so we accept men, women, everything in between. We don't discriminate. And we have made some renovations to the house, some electrical upgrades. We replaced the panel. This house was neglected for some time. It's the place that the previous landlord owned it for some time, and I'm sure it worked for them well, but nothing had been done to it for quite some time. So we had to improve that if we were going to attract, I think, more of the everyday adult in person. So we upgraded the common area, new flooring throughout. We've added a second cooking and washing area in the kitchen, and that's about to come into service. We just need to hook up the sink, and then we will replace the other side as well. We also added in each of the rooms 15 amp plugs so that people could plug in their mini fridges if they want to, instead of just having fridges in the mini area. And we're really just trying to focus on bringing this place to be more of a community minded home, because right now it still needs a bit of work. It's taking some time, but
Yeah, and I think that anytime you take on a major project like that, there is a transition period. And this is, where we kind of struggle sometimes too, as investors is, most of us right now, when we're buying properties that are not in perfect condition. We're buying properties that need some work, and we should be developing a business plan, and there should be a transition for, the next 12, 18, 24 months, this property is not going to be optimized. It's not going to be generating the income. I may need to subsidize it. I may need to pay for renovation. So these are all the considerations that I think are really important when we buy a property. We should be running all those numbers and looking at all the different pieces before we decide if we're in a position to be able to go ahead.
yeah, 100%. And so this place actually had really good financials at the start, but what we've found has been a little bit of a struggle is to keep all the rooms fully occupied. And I think that comes part and parcel with making this the best place that we can for someone to live in, so that it's very inviting and welcoming. And that's something that we are starting to do. So at the end of the day, like, it is a commercial loan. So when Libro Credit Union approved our loan for this, they did it based on the numbers that were provided to them. So when that loan comes due in a year and a half, I better have some good numbers to support it, or they're not going to renew my financing, right? So, so we're working steadily towards that. As the rooms have turned over, we've also upgraded the furniture. We've, repainted and put new floors in them as well too, where it made sense and where it was manageable to do. We didn't just come in and do a complete overhaul of the place. That just wasn't possible. And with the commercial loan, this is my first foray into a true commercial loan. So I'm learning how that works and what that means in terms of, like, an appraisal is $2,500 plus tax. That's just an appraisal, right? Like, holy smokes, you have broker fees. Something that I didn't really have to pay with residential stuff. So there's definitely some extra costs in there and that's why I like to move ahead in steps with new things instead of trying to do too much at once. I've been really actively focusing in the last year and a half of bringing certain projects to conclusion and taking things off of my plate versus putting more on it, because I want to make sure that what I have gets its attention, because it needs it, right? There's all these things to learn, and you kind of, when you learn by doing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things I loved so much about this project is is that it's okay, Melissa, you can talk to them. As you can see, Melissa's a very busy lady. She's got lots going on. She's in her office managing her working with her staff and her tenants. So this is a bit of a passion project for you too, isn't it? I remember you naming this house specifically. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so my niece, so I guess extended family, the family that we choose, but my niece Rebecca, She is, I'll call her special needs. So she currently needs supported living, and she's here in St. Catharines. And I remember some time ago having a conversation with her about housing and affordable housing. And it was actually a dream of hers to be able to build a place that people like her who could live on their own. And she used to live on her own, but her health declined and she's not able to do so now, but could live in a place where they could afford to live there. And so my plan here is that once I finish with some of the cosmetic upgrades and the place looks how I want it to look, is that I'm going to officially name it as Rebecca's house and bring her out to see it. And I'm sure she's going to be super excited. So I'm really kind of proud to name it that after her.
Oh, that's amazing. And, I think you're such a great example, Melissa, about how many real estate investors have these big hearts and these big dreams. And we really, we want to support our family and we want to give back to our communities. And we want to, like, you take someone like Erwin Cito and his Hamilton Basket Brigade, like he started that himself, I don't know how many years ago, like 90% of the funding for that program comes from Erwin and his wife, Cherry. I mean, that's literally, the kind of hearts that a lot of people have. So I love stories like that where, you kind of get to mix, your goal of investing in real estate with something that's so meaningful for you in your personal life as well. And Niraj said it's a very interesting project. It also helps the community. And you're so right, Niraj. In the last however many years, there's been so many, supports that have been removed from the healthcare systems. And, there's so many people struggling right now with mental health and all kinds of other things. An environment like that might be exactly what people need to get back on their feet. Or maybe it's what they need long term, where, you have your own private space, but you also have the opportunity to have, some relationships and to have some company and stuff in common areas.
100%. And I speak with, especially by virtue of being in property management, but I like to get out there and meet and talk to people and other investors. And there's so many that, they may be very quietly doing so, but they're doing very similar things. They are renting, below market values to, I say, people who are otherwise marginalized in society, the, social assistance, ODSP recipients, people who are maybe working but low income, and they really try to reach that group because they're able to do so and they want to do so. And I mean, some of the residents we have in this house, for example, one is, he's a disability recipient and he has, I think, epilepsy. And it seems like every time he tries to work and start a job, he's got a medical episode, and then he kind of ends up getting canned. Super good guy, good heart, but he's not going to be able to really afford a full place on his own with his income as much as he would want to. And this is somewhere where he can comfortably afford it. He knows that, the hydro is going to be paid, the gas is paid, there's internet in there, he's got a kitchen he can cook in, he's got a room just to himself. He doesn't have to deal with the hassle of budgeting with other roommates and things like that. Everyone's got to get along, but that's an example of someone who we're really able to help. And I've seen the shift over the past few years, where the cost of even bachelor and one bedroom apartments is, $1,000+ per month, north of that, some quite a bit more. And that does make it unachievable for some people. And so they also need to live somewhere. And that was really kind of the basis of my conversation with Rebecca, is people who don't have a lot of money to work with and they still need somewhere to live. So where do they go, right? It should be somewhere respectable and with quality.
Absolutely. And if they're, our friends and our family members, we want them to be safe, and we want them to know that, they can have, things and not be worried that they're going to go missing, or that they're going to get stolen, or, that they're going to be taken from them. Like, we want people to be safe and well cared for sure. Now, I would imagine some people here today are interested in learning a little bit more about maybe how to find a good property manager. So can you tell us about how a property manager can help investors, and how what are the hallmarks of a good one in your world?
So I would say that there are lots of amazing property managers out there, even in the Niagara region. And of course, we're interviewed pretty regularly for that position. I'm just going to pull up an article that I wrote here just to have a few key points on that. So there's a handful of questions really that I think are really important for you to be asking a potential property manager. You should be asking them, how many properties, or what's the size of the portfolio they're currently managing. I think it'll give you a sense of what their experience is. Of course, ours started out very small, and I was always candid with, when they say, well, what's your experience? What have you done? How would you handle things? Situational stuff. I would talk them through what that looked like. And if I hadn't experienced something or wasn't sure, I would just simply say that I wasn't sure. This whole fake it till you make it mentality is getting a little bit old. And I think there are too many people out there faking it and not making it. So, you want to get a sense that they're being honest with you. And it's really important to have that conversation with not only the portfolio they're managing, but situations. How would they handle certain situations, to see if it aligns with how you would also like that to be handled. Understanding what their staffing looks like. How many people do you have available? Who do you kind of work with? I mean, everyone expects you to have your power team, and I put it in quotes because it's a term we hear often. I would find that, depending on the job, different people are sometimes needed, but the staffing is really important. Again, I'm one person. I couldn't do this by myself at this point, right? I would suggest asking if they happen to have any rental properties of their own. If you're speaking direct to the property manager, that's not really going to apply to everyone, but it might give a sense of, have they kind of walked the walk and know the pain of that comes with being a landlord sometimes. The answer may be no, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're not a good property manager, but gauging their understanding of rental properties and how they work instead of someone who just thinks all landlords are rich would be really awesome. An obvious one, understanding what they charge, transparency as much as possible. We get a lot of people come to us, so I feel the property manager charged too much. And my question is always, I try to be diplomatic with it and say, well, why don't you walk me through an example where you felt you were charged too much? Because something that might seem like it shouldn't cost a lot, again, if you're allocating your own time to it versus paying for someone else's, there could be a disconnect. So I do try to understand where they're coming from, just to make sure that a property manager relationship will be good with them, because it's not always a good match for that. Understanding if they conduct routine property inspections and how they go about doing that, how they handle maintenance and yard work, again, can vary from one to the next, and area to area. I like the questions, a couple around tools and process. So what rental management tools they use, and what their tenant screening process looks like. I'm a huge fan of process, and it's something I learned as I was in my last few years of my career at the bank, how valuable that can be, and also how important it is to support scale. So if you're going to have someone who's going to manage your property, you have to keep in mind that you are one of many. So how do they keep on top of things? How do they know at a glance how things are going? What tools are they using for that? And that should give you some reassurance, or maybe you're not reassured and you kind of question, okay, how's this person running their business, right? There's no regulation for property managers in Ontario specifically. There is if you manage condos under the Condo Authority, but I would say most of who's probably listening or are looking for one's not really going to fall under that group, right? And I would ask them, what's your process when a tenant is not abiding by the terms of their tenancy? So we generally try to have an understanding of what could be going on in this tenant's life. The goal is to get them to cooperate with things and to not come in with an iron fist. This person complained about you. What are you doing? Well, there's two sides to every story, right? Or, you're a day late on your rent. Yes, they could be. There could be something else going on. We come out with them, hey, has something happened? Do you need to arrange a payment plan? What's going on? And we follow it up with paperwork, but I think it goes a lot farther to maintaining the tenant relationship, to not come in hard at people all the time. Sometimes you have to. I'm not saying that, but just get a sense of how they would handle things, and understanding the communication process as well too. So, we try to meet our clients on where and how they like to be communicated with, but sometimes how we go about that is driven by how we need to run our business. So, some people, again, are great. If I don't hear from you, I never want to hear from you. No news is good news. Usually, if there's a problem, we'll reach out, hey, you need to be in the loop, or hey, I want your input on this because whatever situation. But for the most part, it's pretty quiet for our owners, and they kind of like that, right? But if that doesn't work for you and you need constant reports and feedback, you should make sure that you're working with someone who can offer that to you so that you don't end up dissatisfied.
Yes, I think that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic, because I'm thinking about my 15 years as a property manager, and if there was that alignment in the beginning, or at least the honest communication from owners in terms of, these are my expectations, this is what I need and want to be able to sleep at night, that would be so helpful, because there has to be alignment between it. between, you know, their expectations and the services that you as a property manager can provide. And there needs to be sort of a level of trust there. I mean, I have property owners who, you know, maybe step foot in Kirkland Lake once or twice in the time that they've owned a property. So that level of trust has to be there. That level of, you know, I don't think you're overbilling me. I don't think you're billing me for stuff that for work that you aren't doing, or that you aren't getting quotes and those kinds of things. So
And
out of
yeah.
curiosity, how many people here already have a property manager or are thinking of hiring a property manager in the next few years to manage their investments? Anybody doing any distance investing or relying on a property manager for support? John's always had one. Stella, good for you. Giovanna says possibly in the future. Carrie says yes, absolutely. So as a coach, I always advise my clients, your property manager can make or break your cash flow. So finding the right property manager, I've actually walked away from deals because I haven't been able to find a property manager who I felt comfortable with and had that level of trust with. I would rather not own a building than own a building where I can't find a property manager where there is where we can establish a solid relationship. Rachel, I should offer my services and Barry doing it anyways. Absolutely, Rachel. Okay, so looking at the time, Stella has asked a ton of really good questions during throughout the course of the webinar. So Stella had asked about developing a business plan for a property, what you need to include and make sure everything's addressed. She had asked about transitioning into commercial multifamily, no clue how to begin, what to look for and be aware of. And then she asked about what should I be conscious of and who can I learn from, mentors, that kind of thing. And then she also asked for suggestions on finding off-market deals. So Stella, what I'm going to say is I'm going to reach out to you after this webinar and we can spend a little bit of time. I do free discovery calls. This would be a great topic to be able to talk a little bit more about, is how to facilitate that transition for you. But in the meantime, Melissa, can you talk a little bit about how you built your team of people around you?
I say trial and error and lots of error. It's, you know, sometimes we do not live in a perfect world and people are messy, right? They're messy for all sorts of different reasons. And you know, I've learned to know who I can 100% depend on, who does good work, but I got to keep an eye on them, and who maybe after time is no longer a good fit or isn't a good fit out of the gate. And it's something that can change over time, right? And kind of back to my finger quotes of power team, is that it doesn't always look the same depending on what you're doing. And I've had people, contractors I've worked very well with for quite some time, and all of a sudden they just fall off. And no amount of reaching out gets to really correct that. I say, okay, you know, my responsibility is not to fix whatever's going on in their world. I want to maintain the relationship, but if it can't be maintained, then my responsibility is to find a replacement that has a reasonable expectation of performing good work. I mean, people make mistakes. I make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. I think it's just really taking that accountability and how do we address this? And that includes with the people that you work with, right? So, you know, it's respecting them as well too. I have shifted how and when I communicate as much as I can between, even from staff and contractors. Like, can I do it over email after hours instead of text, so that people don't feel they're on the clock all the time? They don't always want to feel that way, right? They put in their best, they go the extra mile, but really want some downtime. So getting to know your people is really important. And yeah, if that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on something really important. You know, we talked about expectations when you're hiring a property manager, but really in a lot of our key relationships, it's really beneficial to have that conversation about expectations right off the bat. You know, how do you prefer to be communicated with? You know, what kind of business hours do you want to keep? You know, understanding and knowing what resonates with other people, that's the hallmark of a good manager, right? A good manager doesn't manage everybody underneath them, you know, the way they want to be managed. A good manager is able to be flexible and manage people in a way that optimizes or allows them to be able to perform at their best. And that's really what we do as real estate investors. Is I sort of almost view myself kind of a little bit like like what's the word just completely escaped me. I think I had COVID over the weekend and my brain is like hot and batting right now. Who's the person who stands at the front and directs the orchestra? Who is that? Conductor. There we
The
go.
conductor.
Conductor. Anyways, so as a real estate investor, we're really conductors, right? It's not that we have to do everything or we should be doing everything, because as you mentioned earlier, that doesn't build a scalable business. But it's really about how do we find the right people and enable them to do what they do to the best of their abilities. And I think
Yeah,
that's really
100%,
important.
100%. And as a new business owner who is learning, you know, in all my career, I've had to manage other people around me, but not directly. And that was a change for me. And that's something I'm learning how to do. And I have actually some learning programs I think I'm going to engage in that will help, I guess, to better my knowledge from other business owners and such. I think will be really valuable. But you know, it's important to identify that and to know how important it is that, you know, you don't even necessarily need to lead from the front. You can lead from the back. I don't have to be in the forefront of everything. I don't even have to be right all the time. I just need to get the job done at the end of the day. And you know, and I don't do that alone. I can't.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for your time today, Melissa. It's been such a pleasure. I'm going to share some slides and I will share Melissa's contact information for those of you who want to reach out. So Melissa is active in Niagara Falls, Hamilton, Welland, St. Catharines area. If you would like a property manager there who can support you, obviously Melissa would do a fantastic job doing that. But she likes to talk about investing too. There's lots of times where Melissa's like, can you help me? And we spend an hour on the phone easily just talking about real estate and deals. So thank you so much for your time today, Melissa.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Okay, so thank you so much to each of you who have joined us today. We so appreciate your time and know that you are wanting to get back. Most of you probably have a job to go back to. So thank you so much for joining us today. I will be giving away Action Takers Real Estate Investing Planner written by Quentin D'Souza. Melissa, can you give us a number between 1 and 50? And the attendee with that number will be contacted by my wonderful assistant, Mary Beth, and she will be shipping Action Takers Real Estate Investing Planner to you. So Melissa, 1 and 50, what's your favorite number?
Let's go with 24.
24. Okay, right in the middle. Perfect. For those of you who are new to my real estate community, please go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That way you won't miss a thing. You'll be able to see all the webinars that I've done over the last 3 years. Hopefully you will find some good people to add to your power team, some great information to help you fill in some of the gaps on your real estate journey. Of course, I am always here to support you. Feel free to book a discovery call with me. I'd love to learn more about your journey, help you overcome some obstacles. If you are struggling right now as a real estate investor, you're struggling with your strategy, you're struggling with your vision, with your plan, please don't hesitate to reach out and book a strategy call with me. We take an hour together and we dive into, I'm going to be rolling it out in the next couple of months. I'm so excited, but I have created the real estate compass, and this is going to help you figure out what is the next strategy, what should you be doing, what should you be focusing on, who can help you on your journey. So I'd love to be part of your journey. Here's where you can find me and of course Melissa, which I can't thank you enough, Melissa. It's so exciting to have had you as a client in 2021 and to see you grow and how successful you have been. It's very inspiring for others as well. And then my final slide for today, our next webinar is Monday, February 27th. Again, it's at 12 and it's going to be with Victoria Clooney. And we're going to talk about 5 powerful lessons from 20 years of real estate investing. So hope that you are able to join us at that time. Let me just check here. Is anything in the chat box? Great info. Fantastic. So glad you guys enjoyed it. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Melissa, thank you again. Thank you to each of you for attending. Reach out. We're always happy to chat. All the best, guys. I'll see you again in just a few weeks.